Well, good day. Flat Earth Aussie Roscoe here, just to read a little bit to you from the very last of this particular book by a certain Terry Pratchett. And I'm just going to do a very abbreviated version at first, and if you bear with me afterwards I will read the entire bit. This is the exclusive extract from The Folklore of Discworld by Terry Pratchett and Jacqueline Simpson. He says in his first part of the introduction, I met Jacqueline Simpson, who had been my friend and occasional consultant on matters of folklore, and once got me along to talk to the British Folklore Society, where I probably upset a few people by saying that I think of folklore in much the same way a carpenter thinks about trees. In the introduction from Jacqueline Simpson, as I scroll down, talking about Discworld that Terry Pratchett writes about, she says, the truth of the matter is, the disc is the Earth, but with an extra dimension of reality. On Discworld, things that on Earth are creatures of the imagination, but sometimes quite powerful, even so, are alive and in some cases kicking. Sometimes we recognise them at once. Is there anyone who doesn't know a dragon when they meet one? Sometimes we simply feel that something is deeply familiar and completely right, but we have no idea why. Hours, days, or weeks later, we may find the key, when the rich soil that accumulates at the back of the mind suddenly yields the fruits of memory. So there you have it, folks. That's the abbreviated version of it. And it's only going to take a short 5-10 minutes to read the whole thing, because it's just a very short part, exclusive extract from The Folklore of Discworld. Introduction by Terry Pratchett. A number of things conspiracy, to cause this book to be written. Pardon me, I'm in bed, It's after 11 at night, and I do have to be up again at 4 in the morning, so I must do this and have a few hours kip. A number of things conspired to cause this book to be written. There was the time when I was in a car with several other grown-up, literate people, and we passed a sign to the village of Great Dunmow in Essex. I said aloud, "Oh yes, home of the Dunmow Flitch." They had not heard of it, yet back in the late 50s and early 60s the Flitch ceremony used to be televised, for heaven's sake. Not long after this I did a book signing in the South Coast, and I took the opportunity to ask practically every person in the queue to say the magpie rhyme. I was doing research for Carpe Jugulum. In every single one of them recited, with greater or lesser accuracy, the version of the rhyme that used to herald the beginning of the 60s and 70s children's TV program Magpie. It wasn't a bad rhyme, but like some cuckoo in the nest, it was forcing out all the other versions that has existed around the country. Then a distinguished-looking lady was in front of me with a book, and I asked her with some inexpressible hope in my heart how many versions of the magpie rhyme she knew. After a moment's thought, she said, about 19. And that was how I met Jacqueline Simpson, who had been my friend and occasional consultant on matters of folklore, and once got me along to talk to the British Folklore Society, where I probably upset a few people by saying that I think of folklore in much the same way a carpenter thinks about trees. Some of the things in this book may well be familiar, and you will say, but everybody knows this. But the Discworld series, which on many occasions borrows from folklore and mythology, twisting and tangling it on the way, must be the most annotated series of modern books in existence. And one thing I've learned is this: not many people know the things which everyone knows. But here are some of the things we shouldn't forget, and mostly add up to where we came from and how we got here, and the stories we told ourselves on the way. But folklore isn't only about the past. It grows, flowers and seeds every day, because of our innate desire to control our world by means of satisfying narratives. I used to live a short distance away from a standing stone which, at full moon and or Midsummer's Eve, would dance around its field, incidentally leaving unguarded a pot of gold which, in theory, was available to anyone who dared to seize it and could run faster than a big stone. I went to see it by daylight soon after we moved in, but for some reason I never found the time, in the 25 years that followed, to make the short nocturnal journey and check on its dancing abilities. I now realise that this was out of fear. I feared that, like so many stones I have met, it would fail to dance. There was a small part of me that wanted the world to be a place where, despite planning officers and EU directives and policemen, a stone might dance. And somewhere there, I think, is the instinct for folklore. There should be a place where a stone dances. Introduction by Jacqueline Simpson. Ah yes, I remember it well, that book signing on the south coast. A misty, moisty November evening in 1997. A long queue inching its way towards a very impressive black hat. The eager voice demanding, "Tell me everything you know about magpies." A little ahead of me in the queue, one woman had been explaining to all and sundry, as we waited, that it was for her nephew, not herself, that she wanted a signed copy of Jingo. She herself never ever read novels of any kind, let alone fantasy fiction. I only want facts. What's the point of reading about things that aren't real? As for a world flying through space on a turtle? Her voice died out in a splutter of indignation, and the combined arguments of a dozen Discworld readers couldn't budge her 1 inch. I was not surprised to learn what her job was. She was an accountant, which is to say, very nearly an auditor of reality. Give her a small grey robe with a cowl, and she would find a perfect niche on the disc. The truth of the matter is, the disc is the Earth, but with an extra dimension of reality. On Discworld, things that on Earth are creatures of the imagination, but sometimes quite powerful even so, are alive and in some cases kicking. Sometimes we recognise them at once. Is there anyone who doesn't know a dragon when they meet one? Sometimes we simply feel that something is deeply familiar and completely right, but we have no idea why. Hours, days or weeks later, we may find the key, when the rich soil that accumulates at the back of the mind suddenly yields the fruit of memory. Then we realise that the key to the familiarity lies in folklore. Whatever is folklore on Earth finds its mirror in the reality of the disc. Of course, it's quite natural that Mrs. Gogol's house moves about on 4 large duck feet, because Baba Yaga's hut spins around on chicken legs in the forests of Russia. And of course, the Nak-Mak-Feegle are Pictsies, not pixies, because of stories the Scots told about Picts. And of course, there's an ancient king sleeping in a cavern under a mountain in Lancer, because that's what King Arthur does in England and Scotland, and the Emperor Barbarossa in Germany. We've known about such things for ages, even if we call them fairy tales, myths and folklore. Now that we're on the disc, they are real, and we feel quite at home. Well then, what is the folklore of Earth, and more specifically of British tradition? It's the sum total of all those things people know about without ever having been officially taught about them. All those stories and images which drift around with no apparent source. All those funny little customs people follow simply because everyone has always done them, and usually it's fun. If we were bookish children, we may remember precisely when we first discovered some of them. Terry still has his copy of the Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, which he bought second-hand for 10/6. Okay, 50p, when he was 12 years old, and read from end to end. I remember the hot summer day I spent sitting against a haystack, aged 13, and embarking for the first time on the genuine full-length tales of King Arthur and his knights, as written by Sir Thomas Malory in the 1460s, funny spellings and weird words included. But most people, most of the time, just grow up having always known and when to touch wood or cross their fingers, and what happens when a princess kisses a frog or a boy pulls a sword from a stone. They take for granted that there will be pancakes on Shrove Tuesday, pumpkins and scary costumes at Halloween, bonfires on Guy Fawkes Night, mince pies at Christmas. Non-British readers, please adjust to fit your own traditional foods and calendars. So who are the folk, and who have all this lore? The answer is, any of us. It's a mistake to think that the only folklore worthy of the name is what you get by finding the oldest crone in the dirtiest cottage in the poorest village in the remotest mountain valley, and cross-examining her on a deathbed. Every group and subgroup in society has its jokes, its beliefs, its tales and traditions. At this very moment, there are children in the playground giggling over the latest naughty joke. It may not be the one their great-grandparents knew too. Young mothers who take for granted that little girls must wear pink. College students teaching each other the equivalent of Nanny Yogg's hedgehog song. And because there is fun, there's also money to be made. There's a large-scale trade in birthday cards, Easter eggs, Mother's Day cards, Halloween masks and so forth, which no parent dares ignore. and any town or pub or castle which wants to attract tourists will go looking for colourful local legends and customs to exploit. The days are long gone when scholars insisted that real folklore must always be something passed on by word of mouth, not in print. This was never very realistic, at any rate in literate societies, where generations of poets and novelists and dramatists had drawn material from myth and folk tale, twisted and embroidered it, and then handed it on to future readers. And then maybe the readers become tellers in their turn and hand it on again. The tree of folklore has no objection whatever to creative carpenters. Stories and beliefs grow and multiply in all the media available, old and new. They are forever feeding on and then feeding back into the rich soup of tradition. Take vampires, for instance. How much of what everybody knows, who knows anything about vampires, comes from the basic 500-year-old East European folklore, and how much from novels, films, comics, TV, question mark. Specialists may work it out, but does it really matter? Here and now, in the 21st century, all vampire lore has blended together into a luscious soup. Folklore may look as if it never changes, but if you keep a watchful eye on it, you will notice some things dying out and others springing up. In Britain nowadays, people do not wear mourning for months on end after a death in the family, but because grief needs an outlet, a new custom has appeared out of nowhere and is spreading fast. 30 years ago, nobody built roadside memorials of flowers and mementos at the site of tragic accidents, but now this is felt to be right and proper. Customs also travel from one country to another much faster and more frequently than they once did. Since the 1980s, Britain has learned from America that if you tie a yellow ribbon to a tree or a fence, this means you're praying for the safety of some prisoner or kidnap victim who is in the news. In fact, various coloured ribbons and plastic wristbands in support of good causes are popping up all over the place now, in the way that lapel badges used to do, and everyone understands what each one means. On the disc world, folklore is much more stable. New symbols sometimes arise, the black ribbon recently adopted by reformed vampires, for instance. Its earthly parallel was the blue ribbon of Victorian teetotalers, and the commemorative spray of lilac which Vimes and some others in the Ankh-Morpork wear on one day of the year, as explained in Night Watch. But nothing ever seems to be discarded and forgotten. This makes the disc world a wonderful place in which to rediscover the solidity, the depth, which tradition brings to a society, and learn to cherish it. So when Terry invited me to join him in exploring this incredibly rich network of links, I had only one misgiving. Is it wise to explain so much? Might it not be best to let readers enjoy the glimpses and hints and clues half understood, and gradually make their own discoveries? But as Terry has said elsewhere, a conjurer is more entertaining than a wizard because he entertains you twice, once with the trick and once with the trickery. So now there's a drum roll, the curtains part, and you can watch how the conjurer works. Making money. All about conjuring. Excellent book, because it really reveals the truth of the monetary system and how the true wealth is in the people, in the city, not in gold, not in the note, but in the power of belief. As one of the things in it says, at the mint, it can cost them, I don't know, they talk in shillings and stuff, and I don't really quite remember that well enough to quote it verbatim. So I'll just use an Aussie version. And let's say that in today's terms, it costs $1 to make a 5-cent piece. Probably not the best example. Let's say it costs $5 to make a $2 coin, because $2 is actually of some amount of value these days. You would think then that to produce X amount of millions of $2 coins then is to the Treasury a major loss, because it's costing them 2.5 times as much to produce the thing. But the thing is, that $2 coin lasts. Once it's made, it is in existence. And so every time it is transferred to buy one thing, it's now become $2 the first time, or you get it as change, it's $2. When you go and buy something, it's now become $4. When it gets used again, it's become $6. The next time it's used, it's now $8. So it doesn't take very long before the cost of producing the coin has replaced itself over and over, so long as it's kept in flow, in currency. Hence why money is called currency. And so the very concept is that the actual cost of printing money is irrelevant. It's the flow of the money. And so for what it's worth, my own personal opinion is, I've always said, the way to heal a poor economy is not this trickle-down effect by giving more to the rich, who are just very, very good at hoarding it, so that by the time it reaches the bottom, people are still scrabbling around, got nothing to spend. The way you do it is you distribute it to the poorest of the people. Give them a living allowance, a $500 a week living allowance to every single human being. In Australia, at least, would work in our currency. And the key here, the key is to put a cap on all prices, so that inflation is now illegal. Whatever the price of it is today is the price it's going to be tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Now, if scarcity provides the fact that people say the price should go up because somebody's willing to pay more, that's too bad. What that then means is it creates an opportunity for the entrepreneur to say, well, more people want to buy this thing, so I will produce more of this thing. Not that I'll make it more and more scarce to keep forcing the price up so that one or two people can get richer. Once you fix the price, more and more people can get richer, and they will want to, because there is value in having more money than just your minimum $500. Now, because you've got all these people going out and spending their $500 every week, you're going to have to employ more people to be able to take the money from them and sell them the goods that they're after. So all of a sudden now, employment is going up through the roof. And so the people have said, well, yeah, okay, that $500 is great to buy my simple everyday needs and pay my rent and everything. But if I can now get paid an extra $1,000 on top of that to go out and work and be a productive member of society, then I'll do that as well. And then I'll have $1,500 per week, and I'll soon be able to afford a deposit to buy my own house. And then I'll have to build new houses. Then you'll have to employ more builders. And then you'll have to employ more produce more building materials. It's the opposite of the capitalist economy, which says the greedy top keeps sucking all the wealth out of a society. No, you pour that wealth back into the society, keep the money flowing, don't damn the currency. Let the currency be damned. Let the money flow, and everybody gets richer. And then you've got less thieves, less crime. Everybody's happy. It's the key to the economy. Just share the wealth. Anyway, have a good one. I'll talk to you next time.